Let's talk about combining rhythm and lead guitar playing. I'm going to start this off by saying I personally do not like the whole rhythm guitarist, lead guitarist distinction. I think, first of all, both roles are valid. You can call yourself a guitarist, right? And you can employ rhythm or lead where necessary. So you don't necessarily have to pigeonhole yourself as either a rhythm or lead player. Sure, you can have your preferences and what you're comfortable with, but I think, you know, it's like, whenever someone asks me, like, do you do lead guitar or rhythm guitar? I'm like, I just do guitar, man. Like, I think of it more in terms of the role in a band, not so much like what I forever associate myself with. So if, let's say I'm in a band that I'm hired to be on and they need a lead guitarist, okay, I'll have my lead guitar hat on, right? That doesn't make me any less of a rhythm guitarist in my mind, because rhythm is I would say even more important than my ability to play leads and stuff. Although, fun fact, lead guitarist really means leading a band. You know, it's not so much about just playing leads all day long, but it's like leading the band, and usually that entails playing leads, you know. Or if I'm in a situation where I'm playing rhythm guitar, then it's like I'm fulfilling that role. But me, myself, being the one person that I am, right, can fulfill any of those roles. So that's really the attitude that I encourage all guitar players to have, so that you can at least, you know, have the value of multiple roles without having to just call yourself, like, at all times, I'm either a rhythm guitarist or a lead guitarist. That being said, I do love the guitar players who have pioneered the combination of rhythm and lead playing. Guys like Hendrix, Stevie Ray Vaughan, you know, all the stuff the boomers love, and I consider myself a boomer, even though I'm technically an elder millennial. I very much identify with boomer music, and I am proud to say it. So if we were to, let's say, look into the style of someone like Jimi Hendrix, right? Or, I mean, take your pick as far as like blues rockers are concerned, because if you think about the role that they were in, they were usually the only guitar player in the band, right? So they would play with like a power trio. So they would try to play these big guitar parts that weren't just like individual little parts that would mean kind of like layers, right? Like just playing a lead or just playing a rhythm part, you know, that would maybe work in a band with multiple musicians, like more than a trio. But if you're playing in a power trio, it's like, you got to really fill the space. And that's kind of where that combination of like rhythm and lead comes in. So I'm just going to give you guys a quick little look inward on this concept, and something that will get you started on it, you know, immediately. But as meant to be a starting point, right? So that you can get used to the idea and then apply it wherever necessary with whatever styles you like to play. So the first rule that I like to follow when it comes to combining rhythm and lead playing is, it's not really about playing like chugga 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 wheedly deedly dee. Like, you're not just like gonna be spanning across the whole fretboard to do either part. It's like, try to keep them all in the same neighborhood. So kind of like what I did in the beginning of the video, where I was doing this A minor, just kind of blues rock kind of jam thing, right? So essentially I'm playing this riff, but it's just all within A minor pentatonic, right? So I'm doing this like this rhythmic kind of like riff thing where I'm using notes within the pentatonic scale, you know? And then, you know, just venturing out for effect to be able to hit that open A string, doing like that. But I'm trying to stay within the same neighborhood, right? I'm not really interested in playing the lead parts like way up here. I want to find where the lead parts and the rhythm parts all kind of converge on the fretboard. So if I'm just playing over that one chord, right, like the A. So it's like you can you know, play it in like a lead sort of context, as far as like it actually sounds like leads, but you're turning it into this like moving, very rhythmic thing. Like, and then of course, you know, you want to add chord changes, because the whole part of like combining rhythm and lead, like a huge a part of that is like going through changes. So like go into a 4 chord there, which is just a D. It's just essentially a D power chord, but I have that added third on there. So like kind of a D bar chord. All right, and then I'm doing a C bar chord, flat 3 chord, so it's like 4, flat 3, you know, very, very common chord progression in this style. So when I'm doing these, now that I changed to the new chord, in this case, I'm still in the neighborhood of A minor pentatonic, and it shares a lot of notes with that chord. So I can go like, see how when I change the chords, when I like change the implication of what chord I'm playing over, but I'm still throwing in like, so I got like those bass notes helping me signal the chords, right? And then I got those little lead notes that are kind of keeping this cool like blues rock thing going. It's like you can hear that I'm going back and forth between that 1 chord and the 4 chord, right? But after going to the 4 chord, you know, when I go to that flat 3, I think I did something like this. Very Hendrixy thing, right? When you take a bar chord shape like this, same would apply here, right? And then you, very Hendrixy, right? Where you're essentially taking that chord and then sliding up to the major third on the A string, and then still playing that same thing. So when I'm doing this, take note of what I'm doing right here, right? I'm barring these notes here, but when I go, I'm now barring those same notes, but with a different finger. What really changed was this bass note, this lower note. So it's almost like, it's like this sort of like this triad here, right? These 3 notes in that chord, essentially, are kind of like our anchor point where we're dancing around it with the bass note to get this cool sound. So we have the root note of it here. And then, you know, this is 3rd fret on the A string, by the way. And then I'm taking this finger, bringing it up, and then sliding up to the 7th fret on the A string. So I'm now playing the major 3rd, and then now switching, like it's like tag teaming from this finger to this finger, barring the D, G, and B strings on that 5th fret. But you can do that to any, like it doesn't matter where on the fretboard it is. If we do it here on the 4 chord, right? Do that same move. It's such a tried and true thing to do, you know? You know, and that way you're combining like the use of triads, right? Chord tones and stuff, and you're giving it this like lead kind of feel. And of course it fills out the space, makes it sound huge. So when I'm going back and forth between that 1 chord and the 4 chord, you know, so I'm just kind of like improvising my way through it, but it's like keeping that chord progression moving so that you hear the implied chord changes, but I'm just using lead notes and chord, you know, shapes and stuff like that, all within the same neighborhood. So I'm getting this all done just right here on this chunk of the fretboard. So that's really like the #1 rule I like to follow when I'm combining rhythm and lead, is just stay within the same area. So if you're playing a chord, any chord, right? Let's say you're in the key of G, right? If you want to employ G minor pentatonic, so you're now like in that region of the fretboard, right? Where we just shifted down a little bit. And then actually a good place to start really with just practicing rhythm and lead is just do 2 chords. Keep it simple. So you can do a 1 chord and then a 4 chord. And then that way you're staying all really within the same neighborhood as just the minor pentatonic shape, right? So you can do something like this. If you're doing like, let's say, you know, you want to do like a G bar chord or something, or like, or I don't know, even open G, let's say. You can do something like that. Just bounce back and forth between those 2 chords. You know, that was kind of a sloppy example, but at least you could hear, hopefully you could hear how with the changing chords, with those 2 chords going back and forth, with those lead lines peppered in, there was a flow to it. And it kind of blurred the lines between rhythm and lead playing. Because that's really all it is. It's not, like I said, it's not just going like bonka, 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 wheelie deedly dee, bonk. You know, it's like, it's not that drastic. You're just taking those 2 simple ideas as far as rhythm and lead playing, putting them in the same neighborhood on the fretboard, and then stick to something familiar. You know, I'm sure you know some chords, I'm sure you know some scales. I mean, you have to now at this point in this series, right? So you can pick whatever your favorite 2 chords are, and then just stick with one scale in the beginning just to get used to, you know, like keeping those 2 chords together and then like kind of unifying them under that one scale. Minor pentatonic can't go wrong, you know. That scale should never be boring to you despite how much it's played and overplayed, right? There's still an infinite amount of ideas you can pull from that scale. So don't ever shy away from it just because you feel like you've burnt yourself out on it. What you've really done is burnt yourself out on your own ideas. But there's always more ideas that can be had. It's not the scale's fault, you know? So pick 2 chords, pick one scale to bind them, and then just go back and forth and try to keep it to a rhythm. What actually helps is throwing on a metronome. So if you have a metronome, and then as you just have that click going, think of it like this neutral drum loop, right? That should just inspire like movement and rhythm. So it's not so much like if you typically with a metronome practice, like let's say building speed or running scales and stuff like that. Use the metronome as actually, it's actually a great tool for creative riff writing, songwriting, all that stuff, because it kind of gives you a beat. And because it's not an actual drum loop, it's neutral. So it's not stylistically, you know, like steering you in any direction. It's like you have this neutral click, and then you're like, okay, dum dum da dum dum da dum dum da dum 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 da 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 da. You know, you can do something like that, where you're just like going back and forth between those 2 chords, combining them with a little bit of lead lines, and the more comfortable you get with it, right? The more you blur those lines between rhythm and lead playing. And then once you're there, you're in it.